I mean, come on. Look at this thing. I think this is a hot looking car.
Now, we've all heard the old EcoBoost, EcoBoom stories. Well, let's just clear up a few of those myths, shall we?
There isn't a single aspect of this car that stands out, and that is a massive compliment to Ford. It's funny, you know, according to the fans, the Focus ST is one of the most underrated performance cars that money can buy. But on the flip side, according to all of the armchair experts on the interwebs, these are just a torque steering nightmare of a car thanks to Ford's poor build quality and dodgy reputation for reliability. So who's right and who's wrong? Are these things worth the risk, and should you buy one? And we're going to answer those questions and so much more. But first of all, what goes wrong with these? Let's start with the exterior. Okay, first up, the door seals. On occasion they can perish, but this one's a pretty common issue right across the whole Focus range actually. The rubbers can just come away from the doors. Now the good news here, it's a really easy fix. You just give it a clean bit of double-sided tape and done. Also, there are loads of great tutorials and advice on the owners groups and forums to show you how to do it properly. Now this next one can be a bit more prevalent on the pre-update cars, but if the car you're looking at has the pop-out door edge protectors, make sure they're working correctly because they can be expensive to fix. Also, if they get stuck, it can damage the paintwork, but the key to fixing this, like many things in life, is just having regular lubrication. Actually, just on the whole pre and post update thing, the easiest way to tell the difference, post update, the tail lights reduced in size and the headlights got a little bit angrier. And personally, I prefer the looks of the post update car. The pre-update isn't ugly as such, but I mean, come on. Look at this thing, especially in this color. This might be my new favorite color of all time. I think this is a hot looking car. Also, shout out to Ford's design department. I love that on this color, the ST badging is light gray versus red on all of the other colors of ST. Also, with the 2 clear iterations, there were also a couple of other updates as well. Now, they generally included aesthetic and equipment updates. However, an update in 2016 also recalibrated the steering and suspension. But back to what goes wrong with these. On the pre-update cars, the headlights can yellow and kind of scratch pretty easily as well. Also, the DRLs are known to get a bit flickery. Now, Ford did issue a service bulletin for this and a software update, but unfortunately a few owners mentioned that even after they'd done that, the flickering came back. And also with the headlights, there are some reports that they can build with condensation. But again, Ford did issue a service bulletin for this. If you're looking at one of these, make sure the headlights have been seen to. And then at the back of the car, on some of the earlier models, the rear bumper could rub against the rear quarter panel of the car, rubbing some of the paint off, and that can cause corrosion issues. Also on paint issues in this area, some owners have reported really thin paint around the tail lights, although that is pretty rare. But the issue with this is the owners that have had this problem, when they reported it to their Ford dealership, the dealership didn't want to hear about it and refused their warranty claims. Now, while we're back here, make sure you check the boot for any signs of water ingress. Just make sure to check if the carpets feel damp at all. Lift up the boot floor and see if there's any signs of water damage in there. The issue here is that water can leak in through some of the seals, through the tail light seals, even through the little air vents in the rear bar. But in saying that, again, really good news here. To fix it is so easy. Just remove the rear taillights or the rear bumper, reseal them with silicone, and job done. And again, hot tip here, just join the owners groups and forums because there are plenty of great tutorials and how-to guides on how to fix these issues. Look, we actually joined the owners groups and forums to research this video. What an awesome bunch of people. Their insight and advice was just priceless, especially the RS and ST Owners of Australia group on Facebook. You guys are legends. Now, on some of the grey coloured rims around the wheel nuts and the tyre valve, it's known that the clear coat can just corrode off. And also on the wheel nuts, for some reason, it seems that Ford made these out of Parmesan cheese. I'm sure they're delicious on pasta, but structurally, they're terrible. And then with the brakes, according to the owners, these can wear prematurely and they can also get a bit of a warp in the disc. Also, they're renowned for creating a ridiculous amount of dust. Yeah. Now, there are loads of aftermarket parts out there to fix these wheel nut and brake issues. And according to many owners, the aftermarket stuff is generally cheaper, lasts longer, and performs better than the Ford OEM parts. Also, if you're in the market for one of these, just check what tires the car is wearing. If the previous owner has fitted cheap, dodgy rubber, that's the one part of the car that touches the road, Where else are they cutting corners financially? And also on the tyres, these engines ask so much from these guys, so make sure the wear pattern is even. If they're really worn on the edge, guess which ST has enjoyed some enthusiastic cornering. Now look, this isn't necessarily a bad thing because it is a performance car. That is to be expected with this style of vehicle, but it also does give you a bit of an indication of how the car's been treated previously. Now you may have noticed in that engine graphic that the Australian delivered STs were a little bit down on power versus those available internationally. Now in an attempt to remedy this shocking situation, Ford offered a Mountune tuning kit and they came with a full factory warranty. Huzzah! However, unfortunately, it didn't come with the Quaife LSD, which would help this thing get all of its power to the ground, and that could completely transform the car, really turning it into something of a giant killer. It does have Ford's torque vectoring control, which sort of kind of doesn't really work, but we'll delve into that more when we actually drive this thing. Now, also speaking of things that have been available internationally that we missed out on, did you know the Focus ST was also available with a diesel engine? And how cool is this as a wagon? Now look, I'm not all that upset that we missed out on the diesel engine, but the wagon, come on. I love a hot hatch as much as the next bloke, but this thing in wagon form, that has got to be one of the all-time coolest cars ever. Now, pricing-wise, tell you what, don't these things offer some incredible value for money, especially the pre-update ones? Pricing kicks off at around about $12,000 and it tops out at just a smidge over 20. And then with the post-update models, you're going to be looking at anywhere from about $16,000 to $30,000. And to give you an idea of how these things are depreciating versus the highest selling car in this hot hatch category, the Volkswagen Golf GTI, the ST and the GTI are now asking pretty much comparable prices for cars of the same age, kilometers and condition. But the interesting thing about that is that when brand new, the Golf was asking $5,000 more than this, and they're both made in Germany. And speaking of Europe, and actually the UK and even the US for that matter, you guys had 3 different trim levels to choose from. Here in Australia, we were stuck with just the one. Although in saying that, it was sort of a greatest hits compilation of those 3 trim specs. And look, we will be taking you through what you can expect in this trim spec in a second, but first of all, what goes wrong with these interiors? The first big common complaint has to do with the dual zone climate control, which according to some owners can be a bit temperamental. If the starter button is playing up, it can be accompanied by a whole bunch of other warning lights, but this could actually be a battery drainage issue. Now this next one isn't just a Focus ST issue as such, but with many of these things being modified, often very, very poorly, I've got to say. If the interior trim has been removed and then replaced a bunch of times to fit extra stereo cabling or whatever it happens to be, the interiors can get really, really rattly. Also, the very firm ride on terrible roads doesn't help this situation at all. But you've got to remember, these cars were often bought as something of a compromise car. Dynamic enough to be really fun to drive on the weekend, but then sensible and practical enough to cart the kids everywhere. And a lot of owners with kids have mentioned just how resilient these interiors are. Even in this car, it's got just over 80,000 Ks on it. It is used every single day, often to take the kids to school and whatnot, and the interior is wearing really well. Okay, there's a bit of paint peeling off the center fascia here, but that's a bit of a common issue. But the seat or the leather is wearing really nicely, door card's really good. With a proper detail, this would look fantastic. But the biggest complaints we came across when doing the research all have to do with the bloody infotainment systems. Now, it's important to know that during the production cycle, Ford fitted different evolutions of their Sync infotainment tech. And according to the owners, the early cars with Sync 1, they just suck. They can be improved with software updates, but not much. Sync 2, it is an improvement, but it's still not great. Sync 3 is the clear winner, but even then, it's still not perfect. And NSYNC was arguably the pick of 90s boy bands. And look, I know Justin Timberlake is super talented, but man, JC, he has to be the most underrated member of that band. Come on. Anyway, the issues with Sync are the same that we see across so many cars. Bluetooth connection issues, screens playing up like not responding to reverse cameras, radio stations playing country music, all sorts of nightmare scenarios. But one thing that really shits me about the Sync systems is that, let's say you're reversing into a park while also talking to somebody on the phone. When the rear parking sensors are triggered, it cuts the volume to whatever Bluetooth signal you're getting, so the person you're talking to just vanishes. It's so bloody annoying. Now, sometimes using Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, it can fix some of these native infotainment issues. Although in saying that, technically speaking, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto didn't appear in these until post 2017 with the Sync 3 systems. Now I say technically because sometimes, depending on what the car is fitted with, you might be able to update the OEM system to allow Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Other times you're going to have to bin the whole system and fit aftermarket equipment to have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But the good news here is there are plenty of kits available, and some of them even have matching fascias to make the whole thing look totally factory fitted. Now next up, this is a bad one. Just be aware that there are plenty of reports of these cars being stolen because some bastards out there amplify the keyless entry signal, and that means they can get into the car and drive it away without you even knowing about it. Until, of course, when you come out to your car park and the car's gone. And look, this is why it's critical to make sure you get a vehicle history check, because it's going to tell you if the car's ever been stolen, if it's written off, or if there's any money owing on it. And if you need one of those vehicle history reports, go to ReDriven.com or hit the link down below. Now, another area that a few owners complained about were, let's say, some of the interior design choices that Ford made, especially on the earlier models. See, thanks to the early Sync infotainment systems being ancient in terms of tech, Ford unfortunately had to adorn the center console with pretty much every button known to mankind. Now this means that, yes, visually it looks incredibly busy, but here's the thing. My daily driver is a Fiesta ST and it has a Sync 1 system with all of these buttons. And it doesn't take you long to know where the buttons that you require are situated. It becomes almost intuitive. And because they're physical buttons, I just think they're easier to use than an actual touch screen. The other issue is on the later models with the touch screens, because the interior design wasn't based around a touch screen, it was designed around having buttons here. To get to the touch screen, you've got to reach your arm out. So not only do you take your eyes off the road to work out what button you're actually pressing, but then you've got to kind of reach across to actually even get to it. But while Ford sort of stuffed up the ergonomics there, one area that they nailed the ergonomics are the seats and the seating position. First of all, the seating position is great. You sit nice and low, loads of adjustment to the steering wheel so you can get all hunkered down. But these seats, Recaro obviously, but they are fantastic. In the Fiesta, it's very, very cramped, but in these, it's just the perfect amount of support. Also, another ergonomic thing, because the armrest slides, you can rest your arm onto the gear stick here. Now this is really cool because when you drive something like a proper sports car, like an Aston Martin or something like that, because you sit so low and the center console kind of comes up to meet your arm, actually shifting gears, it's just so enjoyable because it's just, you're supported, it makes it really fun. This car does the same thing, but then it doesn't lose any of the practicality. Actually, just on the practicality, you've got a spot which you think would be for your phone just here, because that's where the USB port is, but it's not designed correctly unless you've got like a Nokia 3210. The normal iPhone doesn't fit there. Slidey armrest, which underneath you've got a little shelf and more cubby bin down there. Also under the trapdoor, you've got some of the most ingenious cup holders in the business because they're adjustable. If you drink coffee in bucket size, it'll fit, but then if you're like me and drink some more pretentious coffees like a Piccolo or a Macchiato, you can adjust it to fit there. Also, underneath that, this slides open, so you've got even more space under there. You've got pretty good size glove box, not too bad. Door bins are okay, but the edge of the door bin at the front is a little bit low, so some shaped bottles can just fall out under your feet. That's not good when you're driving, bit dangerous. Spot for sunglasses up there. Also another little cubby storage bin there. Don't know what you'd use that for. Does that fit a phone? Not really. What do you think? What would you put there? Nothing under the seats as such, nothing there. Pretty good for practicality. Now, another complaint these get is that a lot of people claim these feel just cheap and nasty inside. Now, I'm betting those people have never actually sat in one of these. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to challenge a Golf GTI or R for an interior design award, but it doesn't feel as cheap and nasty as it might look on camera. And also, Ford updated the materials and just the overall fit and finish the more recent the model of car. Now, as far as what equipment and stuff you're going to get in this single trim spec, these offered some of the best bang for your buck in the business. Really, only the Hyundai i30N could match or even top it, but when new, it was asking about $1,000 more, and used, they're asking thousands of dollars more these days. Even in terms of safety equipment, you're going to get all the usual stuff, including possibly the hardest working traction control system in the business. But interestingly, the stability control has been calibrated for enthusiastic driving, meaning it will only intervene when it's absolutely necessary. Plus, try to find a used example fitted with the optional technology pack because it includes all of this stuff. Now, so you don't have to remember all of this stuff, let alone all of the common issues, we've listed everything out so it's super easy to refer to on the free Focus ST cheat sheet. It's at ReDriven.com and there's a link down there. It's time for another Wipertech challenge. Will it wipe today's victim? Porridge. Before we see how these wipe, remember Wipertech wiper blades are so easy to order online, they're a breeze to fit, and if you order a set via the link, you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping. Let's see if they wipe. Okay, next up, one of my favourite breakfasts of all time, porridge. Here we go. Okay, go for it. Okay. Okay. That's all right. Oh, okay, look, they struggled at that, but let's be honest, they're going to handle anything that you can throw at them. Get yourself a set today. And as a massive thank you to Adam for lending us his Focus ST, he's going home with a free set of these bad boys, and if you want a set, hit the link below. Okay, now on the subject of all things Focus, in the back seat, I'm exactly 20 centimeters taller than the star of the movie Focus, and absolute bloody legend Margot Robbie. This is in my driving position, and okay, let's start with the positives first. The seats are super comfortable and they actually have like a little bit of lateral support as well. But in terms of negatives, yeah, not a lot of room back here. My knees are squished up against the backs of the seats. I've got to do the whole OnlyFans style leg spread. There's an okay amount of footroom. There's a bit of a transmission tunnel, so I wouldn't want to sit in the middle back here. And also with the dark interior, it feels just a little bit claustrophobic. It certainly doesn't have anywhere near the same amount of backseat room as say a Civic Type R, although this feels a whole other level more premium than the back of that thing. Actually, just on the Civic Type R, if you want to see our full review of that car, the link is down below. Then as far as features and practicality in the back seat, yeah, not great. You've got a spot, I suppose, for your phone. Not really there, it's just gonna fall out. Have a couple of map pockets. You do have, there's little storage bins in the doors and just down below the door, but once you've got a leg in there, you can't actually access it unless you go between your legs. That's just stupid. There's also no pull down armrest with cup holders either. So yeah, honestly, not a great backseat area. Also, sorry, I just realized there's also storage near your hip, but again, if you're sitting there, it's really hard to get to. What's the point of those storage areas when you can't actually get to it if you've got legs or a hip or a torso? Okay, now in the boot, good news here, it actually has a larger boot than a Volkswagen Golf GTI. It's not quite as large as say a Hyundai i30N Fastback or a Civic Type R, but it's a really, really good size, and it's also quite square, so it's easy to fit boxes and stuff in. Also, something that we stuffed up when we made the Ford Focus RS video, link to that is below, is that the seats, they do fold flat. You've just got to lift the actual seat part up first, and then this section goes like, here, I'll show you. So then, see, with the second row completely flat, so much room for activities. Okay, then what are the common complaints and what goes wrong with the driving experience? Well, the first big complaint we came across was that owners really don't appreciate how bad the turning circle in this is. In fact, I think this is just slightly worse than that of a container ship. And yeah, look, honestly, I agree. This turning circle is crazy. There are roundabouts where I live that this thing would require either a 3-point turn or a very enthusiastic pull of the handbrake to actually make the radius. Next up, a few owners have reported creaking sounds coming from the windscreen, especially when cornering hard, and let's be honest, yeah, you're going to be doing a bit of that. Now this creaking issue, it can be down to cheap aftermarket windscreens being fitted, but in saying that, it can happen with OEM items as well. Also, if it is creaking, check the passenger and driver's footwell for any signs of dampness, because these two issues, they have been linked in the past. And then there's the ride quality, or I should say the lack of. Now, as I said earlier, my daily is a Fiesta ST, so I've become sort of acclimatized to Ford's affinity for a very firm ride, but in this, I think I was expecting it to feel more refined. It's not terrible at all, but it's not great. Maybe time and distance has degraded it. Now, this whole harsh ride issue is not hard to sort out. Read through the owners groups and forums, and there's a whole host of different suspension options that will sort out the ride quality, while also somehow having a positive impact on the already phenomenal handling. Hang on, another little roundabout here. This is what makes this car so much fun. Here we go. That is so good. Also, another big complaint about these is that when you put your right foot down, they can become a bit of a torque steering mess, and they do torque steer a lot. But look, maybe I'm looking at this through rose-colored glasses, but doesn't that just sort of add to the fun? And look, the whole enhanced torque vectoring thing, it's doing its best to keep the car on the straight and narrow, but honestly, it does a pretty terrible job at it. What would transform this car would be to fit an LSD to it. Actually, you know what? If you're planning on modifying one of these, forget about throwing more power at it. In the real world, this engine provides all the power you're ever gonna need. Plus, more power is completely pointless when the thing struggles for traction on a standard engine tune and no modifications anyway. But aside from all that, as a driving experience, what an absolutely, what a brilliant package. But as wonderful as this is to drive, short of the terrible ride quality, it does raise the question, mechanically what goes wrong? Because there are stories of catastrophic engine failures and transmissions having massive tantrums. What's the story there? Unfortunately, I can't tell you because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But you know who is? It's Jim.
Now, just to unpack the whole EcoBoost, EcoBoom thing a bit more, it's important to know there are a lot of different engines with an EcoBoost label on it. Pretty much Ford decided anything that's turbocharged and direct injection, well, that was going to get an EcoBoost badge. There are 3 cylinders, there are 2 types of 4 cylinders, and there's 6 cylinders as well, and a bunch of different capacities. They're all different, but they're all EcoBoosts. And granted, yes, some of them are complete shit, but the 2 litre in these ones, they're actually okay. In standard form, these things are actually very reliable. Occasionally we see some air-fuel ratio related fault codes. Sometimes that's from a leaking fuel filler cap, sometimes it's a purge valve. Both of those are actually very quick and easy fixes. We do see the usual failed ignition coil or leaking water pump, but that's pretty much on every car. Have seen a few low pressure and high pressure fuel pumps fail, but not what I'd call a common problem. And there are a few cases of head gasket complications as well. Now, the head gasket issues are far more frequent with engines that are being tuned, and I'll get to that in a minute. LSPI is a thing with these, and it's a thing with all modern direct injected turbo engines. It's low speed pre-ignition, and basically it's just good old-fashioned pinging, typically caused by wide open throttle at low RPM. It just causes an erratic burn, and that makes a lot of carbon and crap go down past the rings and into the sump. Now, when that is bad enough, especially if the car's been tuned or that happens too frequently, they can have piston and ring complications as well. But in a standard road car, basically the way around it is just don't drive it at low RPM with wide open throttle, and just change your oil frequently, every 10,000 Ks, because LSPI causes a lot of soot and carbon to build up in the engine oil. But honestly, mechanically speaking, the biggest issue you're going to face with these is problems relating to bad tuning or tuning that's not that bad and just being thrashed. Now, when these are pushed to the limits, they do have plenty of issues. Head gaskets blow frequently. They can also have cracked cylinder heads, and that can also cause a bunch of overheating issues. And when these things overheat, it's pretty much game over. They do not like getting hot. There have been a few complications with turbos as well, but again, more common in engines that have been tuned. Now, the EcoBoost, EcoBoom thing, typically that reputation is made far worse by people driving like dickheads. And as Adam mentioned, look, tuning these things and giving them more power, look, it really isn't that helpful. It just front wheel drive and have no traction, so I don't know why you'd worry about it. I mean, don't get me wrong, a little bit of power is always, better, but just don't be a dickhead. And as for the transmissions in these, plenty of complaints about synchros being a problem and just crunching into gears in general. Again, in a standard road car, not really that common, more of a complaint when people are, again, leaning on it.
Okay, you ready for a controversial opinion? We think you should buy one of these over pretty much every other hot hatch in this category. Seriously. Yeah, look, an i30N is an epically good thing, but on the used market, an equivalent example will be asking thousands of dollars more, as will the Civic Type R, Subaru WRX, or STI. The Focus is arguably more fun more of the time than the equivalent Golf GTI or R, plus, even though it is German, just like the Volkswagens, generally doesn't ask the same premiums when it comes to parts and maintenance. And the same can be said for the various other European competitors, like the various Renault Megane RS models, Peugeot 308 GTI, Alfa Romeo Giulietta, and Mini Cooper S. They are all great cars, until you consider the finances like depreciation and parts costs. There are wildcard alternatives like the spicy Holden or Opel Astra models, but are they too risky? Even from within the family, the Fiesta ST is outrageously good, hence why I own one, but I'm happy to admit, The Focus is more grown up and easier to live with. You could also consider a Focus RS, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but unless you're on a racetrack, I think the ST is actually more fun to drive more of the time. In fact, I'm going to go as far as saying that one of these with the suspension sorted out, maybe an LSD fitted and an aftermarket infotainment system, is about all the hot hatch any of us would ever need. But there's another hot hatch that ticks all of these boxes and potentially offers even better value for money. It's one of these. But if you weren't to buy this or this, yeah, what would you buy instead? Let us know in the comments. See you next time. Lift up the blue... Dude. But unfortunately, a few owners mentioned that even post the update, it's still flickering. Early sync infotainment systems being me, man. What is wrong with my brain today? Here we go.